Okay, so this is actually very interesting. When you usually talk about dimensional points, it's often stated that there's an infinite number of dimensions in a galaxy or a universe or whatever. But let's talk about a single point that can actually branch off and create more than one point. So basically, if you wanted to take like the third dimension and argue, does the fourth dimension exist? What is the fourth dimension based compared to the third dimension and the second and the first dimension? Basically, what you would do is you would just take, it's just another line of geometry, another, but instead of it being length, base, height, and width, it's something else, for example. So if that is if that's the case, well, if everything is moving in space and everything exists in a third dimension, like somehow, then it's possible that as everything is going out and expanding in an infinite number of directions, at some point that singular line in that direction could branch off and create another two-dimensional, not maybe not two dimensions, but like 2 points. Like they split off, they create like a Y of some kind, or maybe even more. So where do you really draw the line that the third dimension then crosses into the fourth dimension? It's kind of an interesting concept I've always really thought about, geometry, different forces, but the fact that everything moves in space and creates more energy, because basically the idea is this: there's two things. Energy can't be destroyed, it only changes into things, and the faster energy burns up, it also creates more energy, and therefore, but it's almost like when they say that the acceleration of science, the acceleration of what is it? Just all the energy, all in the universe. It's multiplying, you know, but it's also multiplying even faster. It's like the further out it goes, the faster it picks up, and it just keeps regenerating some kind of. It's like every mega parsec or something like that, which is like 1 million parsecs. So it's basically every 3.26 million light years or something like that. It does that. It starts picking up even more speed, or something like that. It's very interesting, actually, to the point where it might even be faster than the speed of light at some point, which I wouldn't be surprised. I've covered this on this channel. So basically, you would have an infinite number of universes creating an infinite amount of energy that would, at the same time, because some of this stuff you have to think about it, and some of the stuff you have to dig for, because the problem is if you were to go on, like, go on Google and type in stuff, you're getting like outdated answers that don't exist anymore. You got stuff like, you really have to dig for it, and you'll find like tons of research that you don't even hear anybody cover, because there's so many news articles getting published of people's findings that they still have to go back and verify and maybe think about. But you know there's so many there's so many theories, though, but it's like if they're based on some kind of logical argument, then I'd say they're onto something, even if it might not originally be what they wanted it to be. But there's been this scientific experiment that was done a while ago, and a bunch of scientists from a university were trying to conduct, like, what if everything multiplies and then it splits off at some point. And so it really got me thinking, because it's like everything in space moves in a different direction, and it doesn't have to just move straight. Maybe it moves in that direction, and then once it splits off into something else. And the same thing could be said about dimensions. That's how other dimensions could be created. It's based on the space and the time that it does that. And if that is the case, then the geometry around it, and the parallel lines, and then when they bisect each other, or we would be able to finally see what they look like. And because we'd finally be able to see what they look like, in some cases we can draw in our head just maybe how big the universe really is, or even where it's at, or all these other universes. And this is another video I wanted to make, but I'll talk about it a little bit here too. It's what if, like, there are infinite universes, and what if another universe collided with another universe? Would it just become a bigger universe? And I mean, I think it would work the same way a black hole, when they collide, they just merge together. They just pull each other together, and you got one big old hole now. So it's kind of like the same thing in this case. Like, what would happen if two stars collided? Well, their mass would definitely expand, that's for sure. But they would just become a bigger object. The same thing with line dimensions, even though they don't really seem to exist. It's just it's just an idea we use to measure stuff. But if we're like to say that if we were to say that a distance of measurement could somehow exist, it would be able to cross between you know, in different number of directions, and then, you know, it would actually, it could probably create a shape that we don't see as likely in maybe the fourth dimension. That's why the fourth dimension kind of looks all trippy and everything, because we're not so used to looking at those optical illusions, rather. But, you know, but it's like, who's to say that there's an infinite, you know, there nothing stopping it from becoming an infinite number, you know? So at some point, you know, maybe that's where we draw the line that an infinite number of parallel universes exist, as well as an infinite number of dimensions. You know, an infinite number of universes that are just an infinite number of big. You know, so and it's all thanks to like just, you know, acceleration and different lines that everything splits off somehow and becomes something much bigger, much greater, or maybe something much smaller in general. So it's something to think about. Something very interesting. Does that mean that every line of geometry or symmetry is always necessarily singular? Not necessarily. You know, maybe it splits off and becomes multiple dimensions, and, you know, maybe it's so small we don't see it, but maybe it's so big too that, you know, maybe we're so small we don't even see it, because, you know, we look at the universe and, you know, everybody always wants to talk about how, you know, they got it all figured out, like, this is how big it is, this is what, but it's like, you know, it's just an estimate, you know, it's all, there's always, and then when someone publishes like another article where it suggests that maybe it's actually bigger, you know, we might actually be looking at this all wrong. You know, like, I remember when people used to think our galaxy was like 100,000 light years. And then you think that's big too, but it's like, then they started suggesting maybe it was 19 times bigger. And then it's like, well, what about every other galaxy that's so far away that looks like it's bigger, but maybe it is bigger, but it's giving off the illusion because it's so far away that it's actually smaller than it really looks. But, you know, that's not true. You know, remember that giant, or if anybody remembers that video that Anton Petrov made, as well as I did, um, there's some videos where I've talked about, there's this thing called a giant arc of galaxies that they discovered not too long ago. It was like something ridiculous that was found in the sky, and they found so many galaxies in one area that it just kind of, like, some scientists were saying that it was too big to be what it was, but it's like, it was there nonetheless. So it started, like, it really started making people think, well, you know what, well, maybe there is an infinite number of galaxies, because, you know, just when we think that there's not, you know, this many galaxies, there could be something out there. You know, you could take an area that doesn't look like there's anything there and you zoom into it, and eventually, because you're looking further in space and time, you eventually find that there's something there in that direction, I should say. But, you know, it's crazy, some of the stuff that we found, and it really does make you wonder what else is out there, because it's like the more possibilities you can think of, you know, the more questions we're going to have. And if that's true, I wouldn't be surprised that you could take one line of geometry and turn it into an infinite number, and therefore you'd have an infinite number of dimensions, if that is proof right there in of itself that an infinite number of dimensions already do exist or are in the process of being created somehow.